The screaming has been going on for 6 hours. Robert Allen is chained to a chair in a Glasgow warehouse. His leg is shattered. 3 bullet holes in his kneecaps. Blood pooling beneath him in patterns that forensic experts will later map with millimeter precision. But he's still conscious. They made sure of that. Because this isn't about killing him. This is about sending a message that will echo through Scotland's underworld for decades. The man responsible sits 10 feet away. Drinking beer. Never said a word. Never touched him. Just watching. Like a quality control manager reviewing a brutal production line. What Robert Allen doesn't know is that this man's DNA is transferring onto everything. The chair. The tools. The weapons. Microscopic skin cells floating through air thick with violence, settling like invisible evidence that will destroy everything. And what the torturer doesn't know is that Robert Allen will survive this night. He'll testify. He'll remember every face. Every voice. Every excruciating detail that his mind is burning into permanent memory as a survival mechanism. When he does, it will trigger one of the largest organized crime investigations in Scottish history. A forensic manhunt that will span 3 continents and rewrite the playbook on modern criminal prosecution. But that's not the terrifying part. The terrifying part is what police discovered when they started excavating this warehouse's secrets. It was just the tip of an iceberg. These men weren't just criminals operating in Glasgow's shadows. They were running a criminal empire worth £200 million that police didn't even know existed. An organization so sophisticated that it took law enforcement 5 years to understand what they were actually looking at. And they were about to find out how deep this goes. Stop what you're doing. Right now. Because what I'm about to show you will shatter every assumption you have about criminal organizations. The man being tortured just committed the deadliest mistake of his life. He stole £30,000 from people he thought were street-level drug dealers operating out of Glasgow's roughest neighborhoods. He was wrong on a level that almost got him erased from existence. Because the super gang doesn't just sell drugs. They architect fear. They engineer disappearances. They perfected making people vanish so completely that their own families accept they're gone forever, without questions, without investigations, without hope. £2 million in cocaine every month flowing through routes more sophisticated than most legitimate businesses. Direct pipelines to Colombian death squads who treat human life like a commodity to be traded. Military-grade weapons hidden in vehicles so technologically advanced that trained customs agents missed them for years. But here's what will make your blood freeze: they operated for over a decade without law enforcement even knowing they existed as an organization. Not suspects. Not persons of interest. Completely invisible. 9 men. £200 million empire. Zero detection for 12 years. Until one microscopic mistake, smaller than a fingerprint, more devastating than an atomic bomb, brought it all crashing down in a cascade of evidence that read like a forensic nightmare. When I show you what that mistake was, you'll understand why every criminal organization in Europe changed how they operate overnight. Why police departments rewrote their investigation protocols. Why forensic labs upgraded equipment they thought was already cutting edge. But first, you need to see how close Robert Allen came to becoming another ghost story. Another name that families whisper about for a few years before forgetting forever. Because what happened to him over the next 36 hours represents one of the most calculated, systematic torture cases in modern British criminal history. And the man orchestrating it thought he had achieved criminal perfection. He was about to learn that in the modern world, there's no such thing as the perfect crime. Only crimes that haven't been solved yet. March 2013. Robert Allen is hiding in Barnsley, England. 400 miles from Glasgow. He thinks distance equals safety. He's rented a small house under a false name. Pays cash. Avoids cameras. Changes his daily routine constantly. Is about to discover that geography means nothing to people with unlimited resources and military-level precision. His car has been tracked for weeks. Not just followed, analyzed. Every movement logged. Every destination mapped. Every routine dissected like intelligence agents is studying enemy assets. They know where he sleeps, where he shops, where he feels safest. They know him better than he knows himself. The note on his windshield looks innocent. Brilliant psychological warfare. Non-threatening. Neighborly. The kind of message that makes you curious instead of terrified. Designed specifically to make him reveal which house he's hiding in, to draw him outside where they can assess his defenses. But here's what should terrify you: this isn't improvisation. This is a systematic hunting protocol they've refined through practice on other victims who didn't survive to describe the process. David Sell sits in his BMW X5 for 2 hours, drinking beer with the casual patience of a predator who knows the prey has nowhere to go. Watching Alan's house like a behavioral analyst studying target patterns. When Alan finally comes outside, curiosity overcoming caution in that fatal moment of human weakness, Sell moves with the efficiency of someone who's done this dance before. The beer can explodes against Alan's face. Blood mixing with broken glass. Instant shock trauma that short-circuits rational thought. But it's not the violence that makes Alan's blood freeze in recognition of his mistake. It's the calm. The professionalism. The complete absence of emotion or rage. This isn't a street fight. This isn't criminal desperation. This is business. Systematic. Calculated. Professional. Alan realizes, in that moment of absolute terror as blood streams down his face, that he's not dealing with common criminals angry about stolen money. He's dealing with hunters who've turned abduction into an art form. Who've studied victim psychology like academics pursuing advanced degrees in human terror. The chloroform-soaked cloth appears in Sell's hand like magic. Professional grade. Medical quality. Applied with practiced precision to ensure unconsciousness without death. As Alan's world fades to black, his last coherent thought is a prayer that someone, somewhere, will notice he's gone. He has no idea that his disappearance has already been planned to look voluntary. That his rental car will be found at a train station. That witness statements have been prepared to suggest he left town willingly. That he's been erased from existence before his torture even begins. The super gang doesn't operate like a criminal organization. They operate like a multinational corporation with a board of directors who happen to specialize in violence, terror, and a systematic destruction of human lives. 9 core members. Each recruited for skills that would make intelligence agencies envious. Each bringing expertise that transforms common criminality into something approaching military precision. David Sell, the strategist and operational commander. Spent years as a long-haul trucker, not just moving cargo, but learning every customs checkpoint, every border weakness, every loophole in international law enforcement. He can move anything across any border without detection because he understands the system better than the people running it. Martin Fitzsimmons, ex-soldier who brought military tactics to civilian terror. Counter-surveillance equipment that costs more than most people's houses. Night vision. Encrypted communications. Tactical planning that would impress special forces operators. Francis Mulligan, the engineer and technical specialist. Builds hidden compartments so sophisticated they fooled trained customs agents for years. Hydraulic systems. False bottoms. Secret panels that require engineering degrees to detect. Mark Richardson, direct cartel connection and international coordinator. When Colombian death squads need something moved in Europe, they call him. When European criminals need South American connections, he's the bridge. But here's what will make you lose sleep tonight: these men had day jobs. Legitimate businesses. Families who loved them. They looked like your neighbors. Acted like respectable citizens. Coached youth sports. Attended church. Paid taxes. While systematically destroying lives with the precision and efficiency of a Fortune 500 company. Their communication devices cost £1,500 for 6 months of service. Not because they were luxury items, because they were military-grade systems designed for people expecting to be hunted by governments. Encrypted. Untraceable. Designed to self-destruct if compromised. They spent £20,000 per vehicle installing hydraulic compartments that would make NASA engineers pause in admiration. Computer-controlled systems that could hide weapons, drugs, and evidence so completely that trained investigators would swear the vehicles were standard. Their greatest weapon wasn't violence or intimidation. It was invisibility. The ability to operate in plain sight while committing crimes that would make hardened detectives vomit. For over a decade, they moved millions in drugs, hundreds of weapons, and God knows how many victims across international borders without law enforcement even suspecting they existed as an organization. Individual crimes, yes. But a coordinated criminal empire? Impossible. Until Robert Allen crawled out of their warehouse and provided the first thread that would unravel everything. But invisibility has a weakness that even criminal geniuses can't overcome. The human body constantly betrays its presence through microscopic evidence that modern forensics can read like a book. And Robert Allen was about to become their first mistake. The mistake that would expose 12 years of perfect crimes. What happened to Robert Allen over the next 36 hours represents systematic torture refined to an industrial process that would horrify medieval inquisitors. The warehouse outside Glasgow isn't random real estate. It's purpose-built infrastructure. Soundproofed with materials that cost more than most people's cars. Equipped with tools arranged with surgical precision. Climate-controlled to preserve evidence while maximizing victim suffering. They've used it before. The concrete walls are stained with blood that forensic luminol testing will later reveal as belonging to multiple victims across several years. Chains hang from reinforced ceiling beams rated to support struggling human weight. Tools are arranged like a surgeon's operating theater, each implement designed for specific types of damage. This isn't improvised violence, this is infrastructure built for sustained, systematic torture. They break his leg with a sledgehammer. The crack echoes off concrete walls designed to contain screams that would shatter normal human psychology. But they're careful. Calculated. They avoid arteries. Avoid fatal damage. Avoid anything that would end the session prematurely. Because death is the end of the message. And the message needs to travel through Scotland's criminal underworld like a virus of fear. 3 shots to the kneecaps with a silenced weapon. Close range for maximum bone destruction. Devastating permanent damage. But surgical precision to avoid fatal bleeding that would rob them of hours of additional torture time. They use medical techniques to keep him conscious. Adrenaline injections. Smelling salts. Ice water. Everything needed to prevent him from escaping into unconsciousness. But here's the detail that will haunt your nightmares: David Sell never touches Allen directly. Never speaks to him. Never participates in the actual violence. He just sits there. 10 feet away. Drinking beer like he's watching television. Observing like he's reviewing a business presentation for quarterly profits. This isn't sadism. This is quality control. Management oversight of a systematic torture operation. Sell thinks his distance makes him untouchable. That by avoiding direct contact, he avoids direct evidence. That he can orchestrate horror while maintaining plausible deniability. He doesn't understand that modern forensics has evolved beyond his comprehension. That DNA transfer is inevitable in violent crime. That skin cells shed constantly. That microscopic blood droplets become airborne during torture. That hair follicles and saliva particles float through enclosed spaces like invisible confessions. That simply being in the same room during torture leaves genetic fingerprints that no amount of distance can erase. That his DNA is settling on everything like molecular evidence that will destroy his life. When they finally dump Allen on a hillside in East Kilbride, barely alive, organs failing, consciousness flickering like a dying candle, they think they've committed the perfect crime. They've left no witnesses who can identify them. No direct DNA contact. No fingerprints on weapons. No traceable evidence connecting them to the torture. They are wrong on a level that will destroy everything they've built over 12 years of criminal perfection. Robert Allen survives. Against every medical prediction. Against every probability calculation. Against their entire psychological and physical torture protocol designed to ensure death without obvious murder. His body should have failed. His mind should have shattered. His will should have broken completely. Instead, he crawls 2 miles with a shattered leg and destroyed kneecaps, leaving a blood trail that looks like abstract art painted in human suffering. When a dog walker finds him at dawn, police initially assume they are looking at a hit-and-run victim. Random urban violence. Tragic but routine. Until Allen starts talking. And when he talks, everything changes. His memory is photographic. Trauma has burned every detail into permanent recall with the precision of high-definition video. Faces. Voices. Conversations. The exact sequence of torture techniques. The layout of the warehouse. The sound of specific weapons. Police Scotland realizes they are not investigating a simple assault. They're looking at something that shouldn't exist in modern Scotland, a level of organized criminal sophistication that belongs in Hollywood movies, not Glasgow reality. The investigation team grows from 3 officers to 50 within weeks. Then to dedicated task forces spanning multiple departments. Then to international cooperation units involving Interpol, DEA, and intelligence agencies across 3 continents. Because the evidence keeps pointing to something impossible, a criminal empire operating with complete impunity for over a decade, generating revenue that rivals legitimate multinational corporations. Financial records show massive cash flows through legitimate businesses that serve as laundering fronts. Property portfolios spanning 3 countries, purchased with money that has no legitimate source. Investment patterns that would make hedge fund managers jealous if they weren't funded by human misery. Surveillance footage connects faces to crimes across multiple jurisdictions. Phone records reveal organizational structures more complex than most Fortune 500 companies. Travel patterns that map international criminal networks spanning from Glasgow to Colombia to Brazil. But the smoking gun comes from where they least expected it. Not from Robert Allen's testimony. Not from financial investigation. Not from international cooperation. From a routine traffic stop that should have been forgotten within hours. 2017, 2 years after Robert Allen's torture. The investigation has gone cold. Too many dead ends. Too many untraceable financial flows. Too many alibis that can't be broken. Police Scotland is ready to file the case as unsolved. Another example of criminal sophistication outpacing law enforcement capabilities. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning in Glasgow, 2 patrol officers conduct a routine traffic stop. Nothing special. Nothing suspicious. Just another beat-up Toyota with a small-time dealer who forgot to renew his registration. The driver is nervous but cooperative. Hands over papers. Answers questions. No outstanding warrants. No immediate red flags. Standard procedure would be a citation and release within 10 minutes. But something feels wrong. The car is falling apart. Rust. Dents. Interior that smells like decades of neglect. But the key fob in the driver's hand is pristine. Expensive. Too advanced for a car worth less than the technology in the remote control. But the investigating officer has been patrolling Glasgow for 8 years. She's developed instincts that save lives and solve cases. Something about this key fob is triggering alarm bells in her subconscious. That's a nice remote for such an old car, she mentions casually. The driver's micro-expressions change. Pupil dilation. Facial muscle tension. Breathing pattern alteration. Classic deception indicators that trained officers learn to recognize. Mind if I take a look at it? The driver hesitates for exactly 1.2 seconds too long. Long enough for Mackenzie to know she stumbled onto something significant. She presses the button. The trunk explodes into motion. Hydraulic systems that cost more than the car itself. Metal plates rising like something from a James Bond movie, revealing engineering that NASA would admire. Revealing a hidden compartment containing enough weapons to arm a small military unit. But what makes seasoned detectives' hands shake isn't the weapons themselves. It's what the weapons represent. Because these aren't street-level dealer protection. This is military-grade hardware designed for warfare. And when they run the serial numbers, everything connects. Ballistics matching bullets recovered from Robert Allen's torture. DNA evidence linking weapons to crime scenes across Scotland. Financial records connecting weapon purchases to the same laundering networks they've been tracking for years. One wrong key fob. One moment of criminal overconfidence. One button press that triggers the collapse of a £200 million empire that had operated with perfect invisibility for over a decade. The arrest warrants are signed within hours. The raids are planned like military operations. The evidence seizures fill warehouses. But some ghosts refuse to stay buried. The DNA evidence doesn't just solve Robert Allen's torture case. It opens a door to hell that law enforcement didn't know existed. Every weapon seized connects to multiple crimes across years of operations. Every financial record reveals deeper corruption networks. Every phone intercept exposes wider criminal connections spanning international borders. Forensic analysis reveals David Sell's genetic material on weapons used in Allen's torture. Not trace amounts that could be explained by contamination. Not secondary transfer that defense attorneys could challenge. Quantities that could only occur through direct presence during violent crime. Skin cells embedded in weapon grips. Saliva microscopic droplets on tool handles. Hair follicles caught in metal mechanisms. Scientific evidence so overwhelming that denial becomes impossible. Police Scotland realizes they've stumbled onto something unprecedented, a criminal organization so sophisticated that existing law enforcement categories can't adequately describe it. They create a new classification, super gang. Not because they are heroes or figures to be admired. Because they've evolved beyond traditional organized crime into something that operates like a shadow government with international reach and unlimited resources. The evidence reveals international money laundering networks that would make Swiss banks envious. Extensive influence and connections spanning legitimate businesses, law enforcement contacts, and powerful networks that reach into various institutions. Drug distribution systems more efficient than Amazon's logistics networks. Weapons trafficking routes that bypass every security system in Europe through techniques that intelligence agencies are still trying to understand. But their masterpiece isn't their criminal enterprise. It's their victim management system. They don't just kill people who cross them. They engineer disappearances so complete that families accept death without bodies. Communities forget names without investigations. People vanish from existence like they never lived at all. The warehouse where Allen was tortured contains evidence of multiple victims across several years. Blood evidence. Personal effects. Identification documents that belong to people reported missing but never found. Robert Allen survived to tell his story. Others weren't as fortunate. The arrests, when they finally come, coordinated like military operations. Simultaneous raids across Scotland timed to prevent communication between targets. International cooperation spanning 12 countries. Evidence seizures that require professional moving companies to transport. But some criminals understand that capture means death sentences in different forms. James and Barry Gillespie, the international connection and cartel liaisons, flee to South America as arrests begin across Scotland. Direct cartel relationships built over years of reliable service. Professional killers who understand that crossing Colombian death squads is more dangerous than crossing law enforcement. They disappear into Brazilian favelas thinking geography and corruption will make them untouchable. That international law enforcement cooperation has limits that money and violence can exploit. They are wrong on a level that will cost them their lives. Because what they don't understand is that their Colombian cartel partners view international attention as toxic to business operations. Foreign criminals who bring government scrutiny become liabilities that need to be eliminated. The cartels don't rescue inconvenient partners. They bury them. Brazilian authorities, working with Interpol and British intelligence, track the brothers through financial transactions that should have been untraceable. Money transfers, property rentals, communication intercepts that reveal their exact locations. But before arrests can be coordinated, the brothers simply vanish. Not captured. Not extradited. Just gone. Their rental property is found empty. Personal effects abandoned. No signs of struggle. No evidence of departure. Like they were erased from existence by professionals who've perfected making people disappear. The cartels don't leave witnesses. They don't take prisoners. They don't allow loose ends that might threaten billion-dollar operations. The brothers who thought they could disappear into South America may have been disappeared themselves. By the same people they thought were their protection. Justice served by criminal organizations more efficient than legal systems. December 2017. Glasgow High Court. The trial that will redefine organized crime prosecution across Europe and establish precedents that law schools will study for decades. David Sell walks into court thinking he has the perfect defense. An alibi witness. A respectable accountant with no criminal record who swears Sell was nowhere near the torture warehouse during Alan's ordeal. David came over around 6 p.m. We had drinks. Watched television. He crashed on my sofa. He was definitely there all evening and night. Never left. Couldn't have been involved in any violence. Perfect testimony. Credible witness. Unshakable story backed by financial records showing the accountant had legitimate business with Sell. The defense attorney presents this alibi with confidence that borders on arrogance. How can DNA evidence compete with a human witness who swears the defendant was elsewhere? Except for one microscopic problem that destroys everything: DNA doesn't lie. DNA doesn't have motives. DNA doesn't make mistakes or misremember events. DNA is scientific truth that no amount of perjury can overcome. Forensic expert Dr. Margaret Hughes takes the witness stand with evidence that will haunt the courtroom. Sell's genetic material isn't just present on weapons used in Alan's torture. It's embedded in quantities that forensic science can read like a detailed timeline. The defendant's DNA is present in patterns consistent with direct contact during active violence. Skin cell transfer indicates extended presence in an enclosed space during traumatic events. Blood spatter analysis shows he was within 6 feet of the victim during active bleeding. The jury watches as Sell's perfect defense doesn't just collapse. It implodes in a cascade of scientific evidence that makes his alibi witness look like a criminal conspirator. When confronted with irrefutable forensic proof, Sell's attorney advises him to plead guilty to avoid life imprisonment. The alibi witness faces perjury charges that will destroy his legitimate business and send him to prison alongside the criminals he tried to protect. Robert Allen sits in the courtroom gallery, watching his torturers led away in chains. Mobility aids support legs that will never fully heal. Chronic pain medication manages suffering that will never completely end. Nightmares wake him screaming several times each week. But he's alive. Breathing. Testifying. Looking his torturers in the eye as they are sentenced to decades in prison. Seeing them in cages? Allen tells reporters outside the courthouse. It was worth every moment of pain. Every hour of torture. Every nightmare. Because now they can't do this to anyone else. January 2018. The sentences delivered rewrite Scottish criminal law and establish precedents that will influence organised crime prosecution across Europe. David Sell, 15 years, 8 months for torture, with additional substantial sentences later imposed for the wider criminal enterprise, bringing his total to over 33 years. Martin Fitzsimmons, 18 years for organised crime participation and violence. Francis Mulligan, 16 years for criminal engineering and conspiracy. Combined total across the organisation, 87 years of prison time that will keep them behind bars until they are elderly men who remember their criminal empire like a distant nightmare. But the real victory isn't the prison sentences. It's Robert Allen walking out of the courtroom on his own feet, scarred but unbroken, having faced down the monsters who tried to erase him from existence. The investigation continues even after the trials. Financial experts trace money flows that reveal the true scope of their operations. International cooperation uncovers criminal networks that span 3 continents. Evidence analysis fills databases that will help solve cold cases for years. But some stories don't have clean endings that satisfy human needs for closure and justice. January 2023. Police Scotland makes an unprecedented announcement about the Gillespie brothers who fled to Brazil 5 years earlier. Based on intelligence received from Brazilian authorities and international partners, we believe James and Barry Gillespie may have come to harm. Translation in criminal justice language: Colombian cartels don't tolerate loose ends. Foreign criminals who bring international law enforcement attention become liabilities that are eliminated with the same efficiency they once brought to their own victims. The brothers who thought they could disappear into South America may have been disappeared themselves. By the same people they thought were their partners and protection. Their bodies will never be found. Their families will never have closure. They simply vanished into the same void they created for their own victims. Sometimes justice comes from unexpected sources. Sometimes criminals destroy each other more effectively than legal systems ever could. Today, the numbers tell a story that changed organised crime prosecution forever. 42 people convicted across the entire network. £54 million in criminal assets seized and redistributed to victim compensation funds. 77 firearms recovered, each one representing potential future violence prevented. Over 2 tons of drugs destroyed before they could reach streets and destroy more lives. But the most important achievement is the dismantling of this specific type of highly sophisticated, long undetected criminal organization in Scotland. No super gang level operations of this scale and invisibility have emerged since their destruction. Because this case didn't just destroy one criminal empire. It evolved law enforcement itself into something more sophisticated than the criminals it hunts. Police Scotland now has dedicated organised crime units with technology and protocols that didn't exist before Robert Allen crawled out of that warehouse. They've developed intelligence networks spanning continents. Forensic capabilities that can trace DNA evidence to molecular levels that make criminal concealment nearly impossible. Financial investigation teams that can follow money through any laundering system on Earth. The age of invisible criminal empires operating with complete impunity is over. Modern forensic science has made the perfect crime extinct. But here's what should keep you awake tonight. The super gang operated for over a decade before one microscopic mistake exposed them. One wrong key fob in a routine traffic stop. One moment of overconfidence. One button press that triggered the collapse of a £200 million empire that seemed untouchable. How many other shadow organizations are operating right now in cities across the world? How many other Robert Allens are chained in warehouses we haven't discovered yet? How many other criminal empires are one small mistake away from exposure? The terrifying truth is we may never know until forensic science evolves enough to catch them. Until another victim survives to tell their story. Until another microscopic mistake brings down another invisible empire. What we do know is that modern criminals can't hide from modern science. That DNA tells stories criminals don't want told. That organized crime has met organized forensics, and the criminals are losing. But the war continues in shadows we can't see, fought by people whose names we'll never know until the day their mistakes bring them into the light. This has been Crime Scene Chronicles, where we expose the truth behind the headlines and reveal the forensic science that brings monsters to justice. If this investigation grabbed you by the throat and wouldn't let go, you need to see what I've uncovered about similar organizations operating across Europe right now. Criminal empires with victims who are still fighting for justice and cases that will make the super gang look like amateur criminals. Hit that subscribe button and smash the notification bell because what you just witnessed is nothing compared to the forensic revelations coming next week. What shocked you most? The systematic torture? The organizational sophistication? The fact that they almost achieved perfect criminal invisibility? Let me know in the comments because your reactions guide which cases Crime Scene Chronicles investigates next.